Field staff. We can have everyone take a seat. We're about ready to get this show underway.
Get me a holler next time, you secretary. See you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Whitney Dameron. I'm the chair of the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Commission. Welcome to Wichita, this facility. I hope you have time to look around a little bit. We appreciate the hospitality. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our fellow commissioners. We have, I believe, two that are virtual, and then Commissioner Carpenter will be late today, but I'll move to the left for Emmerich.
Emmerich Cross, Kansas City.
Warren Gefeller, Russell.
Bruce Riedel, Ellenwood.
Celia Lister, Pittsburgh.
Don't see marks on there yet.
And we may have Commissioner Keith Mark at some point in time. And then again, Commissioner Carpenter later in the meeting. So again, appreciate that. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda today?
No
Sheila?
changes.
Very good. We need approval of the October 3rd minutes. If you've all had a chance to take a look at those.
Yeah, I moved to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
We're now moving right along. Number 5, department report. Public hearing on administrative rules and regs. Matt Peak, I believe. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Yes, this is KR 115-25-8 elk open season bag limit and permits. This regulation was last workshopped in front of the commission in March of 2024. The change to the regulation that you'll be voting on today is the establishment of an additional firearms season on Fort Riley. The new season will last the entire month of January. Unfilled antlerless elk permits would valid on Fort Riley would already be valid during this new season as the reg is currently written, but there is some text added on the second page a little over halfway down that allows all unfilled antlerless only permits valid on the fort to be used at that time as well. So in a nutshell, the changes to this regulation will extend the season on Fort Riley by 1 month, which is the month of January, and will allow any unfilled Fort Riley permits to be used during that time. So with that, I'll turn this back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. We require a vote on this today, Curtis?
Yes. Yes, we need a vote,
Or,
or sorry, we need a roll call vote for this, please.
let's see if we have any questions from the commissioners first. Is there any questions about this,
Question.
Ray?
We need a motion.
Any comments from the public? I think we allow that at times, don't we? If there's anyone who wants to speak to this particular reg? Okay, a motion is timely.
I make the motion.
I'd second.
Any discussion? Roll call, is that correct?
Yes, we need a roll call vote, please.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, Commissioner Cross,
Yes.
Commissioner Gefeller,
Yes.
Commissioner Lister, Yes. Commissioner Mark. Commissioner Mark's still
Yes.
on.
No, he's in.
Okay.
We've just got a little
Okay.
play.
Commissioner Riedel,
Yes.
Commissioner Dameron,
Yes,
pass 6-0.
Thank you.
thank you. Levi Jaster is going to talk about deer open season. KR 115-25-9A.
So this is the regulation governing deer seasons on our military subunits. And we currently already have an approved temporary regulation in place for this. This just provides the permanent regulation. And so I would take questions if there are any.
Questions from the commission? Questions from the audience? With that, a motion would be in order.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? We're ready for the roll call.
Commissioner Cross,
Yes.
Commissioner Gefeller.
Yes.
Commissioner Lister, Yes. Commissioner Mark,
Yes.
Commissioner Riedel,
Yes.
Commissioner Dameron,
Yes,
pass 6-0.
thank you very much. Curtis Wired, Regulations in Promulgation, or Legal Counsel.
Thank you. You can see there in the agenda, we have the list of regulations that are currently in promulgation. I won't go through all of them because you've all heard them multiple times. However, I did want to point out on 115-2-1, we had workshopped and talked about the trout fee. I wanted to mention that given the recent situation where we discovered that the senior lifetime pass had expired back in June of 2020, we decided, speaking with the secretary, decided to propose 3 new senior discounted licenses to try to ease the burden in the meantime while we continue to go forward and explore all other options. And that will come back before the commission, obviously, for approval, denial, as the commission's authority is later down the road. And the licenses are 5-year senior hunt and 5-year senior fish, both at $50. And then there will be a 5-year senior combination fishing and hunting license at $90. Other than that, does the commission have any questions about current regulations?
Any questions? I think we've seen all these coming through before.
Correct.
Very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Curtis.
We missed general comments.
What's that?
We missed general comments for public comment.
That's where we're at. Oh, yeah. Any,
It's okay.
any comments from the public on those regs? Very good. We're now at general public comments. I'll make a couple of comments. So at our last meeting, we had an individual who traveled a long ways, had a lot to say. We appreciate that. We want to encourage that. But for scheduling purposes, if people are going to have a long presentation, you know, we would encourage them to let Sheila or Sheila's successor know, so we can manage the calendar a little better. All worked out. It was just fine. But for meetings now going forward, we're going to encourage people to limit their public comments to no more than 10 minutes unless they can give us some notice. We're not going to strictly enforce it or start a clock or things like that, but just out of courtesy to everybody who comes, we'd like to put some kind of controls in place for the public comments. I'm going to take personal privilege as well. Be the first speaker of public comments. I had the opportunity to go to the Milford Fish Hatchery here about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and received a tour from hatchery manager Derek Schneiderwind. I have to look at his name because it's a little difficult to pronounce and harder to spell. Lieutenant Jesse Gert, game warden, and game warden Justin Counts had a great tour of their facility and little interaction with what they do and how they provide service to the state of Kansas. I think Derek has been at the hatchery for 24 years, and Lieutenant Gert has been on with the department for 19 years. So they like what they do. We appreciate the longevity. And Justin has been there about a year, excited to come to work for Wildlife and Parks. So with that, I would open it up to the general public for general public comments. If you have any, please approach and identify yourself. Thank you. Up here.
Okay. My name is Rebecca Armstrong. I'm an educator at Northeast Magnet School. We have an Owl's Garden, which is an outside wildlife learning site. We've had it for about 4 or 5 years now. And we have a nature echo club. Some of those students are with me here today and would like to speak. I want to express upon everyone the importance for children, all children, and adults to have access to nature. I see it every day. I'm 70 years old. What I'm seeing is kids don't have that access. Most of the kids are stuck with cell phones, with technology. There's not a place close to their home. There's not a way. They come to school on a bus. They stay in the school. They don't have access at all. They don't have that experience. And I see that. I watch the kids. They're afraid of bugs. They don't see bugs. They don't know what those are. What I watch is these kids come out into the open, into nature, and they shed that skin, so to speak, and become so excited. And so I started talking to them about ornate box turtles. I had ornate box turtles in my own yard, and I have a story around that. These kids became excited. They wanted to be able to have ornate box turtles. So we have to save the habitat. We have to create habitat where it's being destroyed. We need to do this because it's essential for us as human beings to have this connection with the wild world. We're really part of that wild world. I see it when I see the kids step outside. I see them light up. I see them get excited. Now, these are the kids that came with me today to talk, and they each wanted to talk and appeal to you to do the best you can to help save wildlife and make nature accessible to everyone, that should be within 5 or 10 minutes of everybody's life. It shouldn't be separated. And for you to do everything you can to save these species, save the ornate box turtles, so these kids can experience that. And so one of you want to speak first, or Alicia? There's Alicia Waterman. Her parents are also here. And I want to tell you just a real quick story about Alicia. Alicia goes out into the garden. She comes out into the school. She's the one, she sees a praying mantis on the wall. She's the one who sees what did you call the bug? Yeah, wheel bug. So she's the one who takes the pictures and looks them up, and she's telling me what we're looking at. One day she came up to me, said, "Mrs. Armstrong, look what I have." She had a baby sparrow that was learning to fly, and I got to watch her, and it was magical. I got to watch her out there throwing this sparrow up in the air till it flew. And just how they are is amazing. It's heart-wrenching to see this joy that this kid has. And they all should have that experience. They all should be given that. Alicia, you want to come out first? And then Janetta wanted to say a few things too. But
Come on
I'm
up, Alicia.
really proud of these kids.
Welcome.
Okay, so I'm here from Northeast Magnet, which is in Bel Air, and I came here to address the declining stuff about the ornate box turtles. You see, they're going extinct because of humans and all that stuff. So basically, we're here to announce that we're going to try to have to save them, because some people apparently think it's funny to kidnap these turtles from their home and go and like put them in a race. Like, wow, that's a wonderful idea. Like, this person goes and says, wow, look, an ornate box turtle. I'm gonna pick it up and go race it and get $5 million, because some people like to actually bet on that. That's weird. And yeah. So like, people need to improve their behavior on that stuff, because that's just absurd. Like, what are you doing with your life if you do that? Nothing. That's nothing, exactly. So they need to improve their freaking behavior and all that. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
My name is Janetta. I live in Wichita and go to school at Northeast Magnet High School. I'm a sophomore. Our school has an owl's garden outdoors wildlife learning site. Outside of our lunchroom, we would like to expand this garden of our 65-acre property. Last year, a monarch duck laid her eggs in our garden. We all got to see the eggs, and some of us saw 10 ducklings walk away. I want to share something I've always wanted to do: see an ornate box turtle in the wild. Living in Wichita, I know these turtles are native to the area and prefer grasslands and prairies. These turtles have a beautiful shell, and I've always wanted to witness one in its natural habitat. Unfortunately, living in an area with limited wilderness, this might not happen for me, but I still hold on to hope that one day I'll get to see one. In the meantime, I support conservation efforts to make sure these turtles can thrive for others to enjoy.
Thank you very much.
I thank you for allowing us to talk, and thank you for the work you do. We all have to be doing the most we can right now to save life here on Earth. And it's really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you for what you do as well. You have any questions for,
I just have a comment. I'm so happy to hear that you're doing an outside at your school, a fairly recent one. That's a great program that years ago, there were well over 100 sites all across the state. Gives kids a chance to participate, during school hours. And just so happy to hear that you've got a new one going. Thank you.
Kids want to expand this, so we have about 58 acres, but we have about 30 acres we want to restore into native habitat. So they're wanting to petition the school to do so. It's major learning opportunities. That's science, that's law, that's art, and the kids are all in there. Northeast Magnet is a law, art, and science magnet. And all of those things involve nature. So the kids are just lit up. When they go outside, they're inspired. So thank you. Thank you.
thank you very much. We have other people wishing to speak under public comments today. Anyone online? Yeah,
Nope, everything's good.
very good. Well, we'll have another opportunity later if it comes to you. We're now ready for a department report, starting with the secretary remarks. Secretary Kennedy.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, members of the public. I'm really happy to be here and happy to have this opportunity to share updates with you and the public today. After listening to the presentations from our youth, it forced me to rearrange my speech a little bit. I couldn't help but be, Mrs. Armstrong, I can't do anything but thank you again. Thank you for coming and participating and allowing your students to participate in this process as well. It's a breath of fresh air. It lets me know that the resources that we provide are ones that our society needs, and we've got a strong future ahead of us, and that makes me proud. I think about when I was a young biologist, I did a lot of educational programs, and I did one for a group of students in a major city. I mean, major city, even more major than Wichita. And we loaded these students up on a boat, on a bus. We took them out to a conservation area with hopes. We gave them all nets, and I wanted them to go out into this little pond area and catch some aquatic invertebrates. And then we would identify the invertebrates and talk about the value to the overall ecosystem. That particular day, it was raining. And I'm looking at about 60 kids. I mean, they got on $100 tennis shoes. And I'm thinking to myself, there is no way that they're going to get off this bus, go through the rain, and get in the mud to collect bugs. And so I started walking off the bus. I had my back to them, and I'm already envisioning in my mind what the students look like. And I'm figuring that they're dragging their nets, just kind of not really wanting to go, feeling like maybe they were being forced to go. And I turned around, and they were geeked, totally excited about going out in that pond, dirtying up their $100 pair of shoes. Those $100 pair of shoes meant nothing at that point. And it just, kind of emphasized the importance that nature has on the overall development of our children. And we as leaders ought to be thinking about it for them as we build our cities. We ought to be thinking about, do the citizens have a area close by where they can experience nature? We ought to be thinking about how can we work in schools to help teachers like Miss Armstrong help even, facilitate that message even further. And so thank you. I truly appreciate it. I've got 2 daughters of my own, and I wonder where they would be without outdoor activity. All the times we went fishing, canoeing, kayaking, I mean, they are older now, 30 and 26 years old. There's no boat they can't drive. There's no gun they can't shoot. They have an awesome amount of confidence. They're both nurses, and I know that all those experiences, helped um, improve their ability to do their jobs. And I'm still proud dad because I don't think they can find a boyfriend that can outfish them, and that definitely makes me proud. Wanted to start off talking a little bit about last weekend. Last weekend, I had the opportunity to go on my very first pheasant hunt at the annual Kansas Governor's Ringneck Classic. It's a picture perfect morning. Crisp in the morning, early hours, and it warmed to about 60 during the day. I joined a group of men that I had never met before, but as you can imagine, with any hunting party, the camaraderie between the hunters really grew as we hunted that day. When I returned home, I roasted my pheasant, just a little bit of seasoning and bacon, and I definitely enjoyed the meal that evening. But it's an experience that I'll never forget. And it got me to thinking about the first time my dad took me quail hunting. That was more than 30 years ago, but it's those cherished memories that motivate me to do the job that I do today. The Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks has a sacred charge to ensure both current and future generations can enjoy our living resources. We can sometimes get bogged down in the detail of regulations, and yes, it's critically important, and it's obviously why we're here today. But I encourage us never to forget our higher purpose, and that's to help Kansas make those outdoor memories and leave a legacy for those that come after us. I know that I enjoy seeing that in our KDWP staff, and you talked a little bit about that earlier, Mr. Commissioner. This, for most of us, is the reason why we're here. It's why we devote countless years of our lives to this field and to this profession. Tomorrow will be our second of our fourth regional meeting, which I've invited all KDWP staff to join me in a leadership team to discuss challenges and opportunities for the future. I continue to ask them to think strategically and to help us guide our agency and our state's natural resources into the future in a responsible and sustainable way. The first of these meetings went very well and were well attended and productive. Unfortunately, there weren't any questions that our leadership weren't already working on to address. I'm eager to visit with our staff tomorrow in Pratt, and I look forward to the conversations we'll have there, and we'll continue these meetings around the state. This is all an effort to improve internal communication and really garner the support and knowledge from our staff to ensure that we're making decisions that represent the whole agency and not just one individual or another. I would like to now dive into our financial report. The Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks fee fund financials typically include revenues generated from various fees, such as hunting and fishing license, park interest fees, boating registration fees, and other recreational permits. Within our wildlife fee fund, as of October, our October revenue was $1.8 million. Our fiscal year net revenue was $5.5 million, which is a 14% increase from last year. And we have a cash balance as of October of $22.3 million. Within our park fee fund, our October revenue was $927,000. We have a fiscal year net revenue of $4.5 million, which is a 12% increase from last year. And we have a cash balance of $9.4 million. Within our boat fee fund, we have an October revenue of $91,000, our fiscal year net revenue of $500,000, which is a 9% increase from last year. We have a cash balance of $2.9 million within that fund. And within our cabin revenue, our October net revenue from cabin rentals was $82,000. We have a fiscal year net revenue of $495,000, which is a 29% increase from last year. And we have a cash balance as of October, $1.7 million. I recognize that sounds like a lot of money. I've just shared with you our financial report that outlines the revenue of wildlife and parks that's generated from fees such as hunting, fishing license, and park interest fees. While that report shows an increase in revenue, and it's a really good indication of how the public actually feels about the resources and the services that we provide, it doesn't truly show a full picture of where we are. The reality is that expenses continue to climb, and revenue increases are simply not keeping pace. I'm working with our team to approach to be fiscally responsible from all angles. Long term, one way that we can do that is truly by bolstering our public support. It is our hope that by increasing public support, by increasing the amount of engagement, that we will be able to maintain the programs and services that we provide for our citizens. I would like to thank you again, Mrs. Armstrong, and students. I really appreciate your time and your courage to stand up in front of this stuffy commission. But I'm certain that your teacher giving you these opportunities will serve you well in the future. And I look forward to working with you in the future, as I think a lot of our goals align, and there are definitely some services that I or my staff can provide to your school and helping you restore that 30-acre area you would like to. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there questions from the commission of the secretary? We'll let you off easy today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're not going to have a legislative update from Martin DeBoer.
Thank you, Chairman, Commission. Post-election, we're looking at a very similar makeup in the legislature. There's a majority Republican legislature going into session. Leadership elections are happening on December 2nd. And then we'll get an idea of who we're playing with. And then committee assignments will come out after that. A couple of dates to remember are we don't know if it's December 12th or 13th. The special committee on legislative budget will take a look at the agency's budget and their new process. And then on December 16th, we'll have the Joint Committee on State Building Construction look at our capital improvement plan. I will note that we do have continued and productive conversations with legislators as well as our stakeholder groups and the members of the public, aligning with what the Secretary just mentioned, engaging people to be proactive in participation with the agency. With that, I'll stand for questions.
So Martin, when you work with legislative research, you handle budgets and issues. And so there are some unique challenges coming your way this year, as we all, or some of us understand, whereas the legislature is going to do their own budget and the governor is going to have her budget.
Correct.
And so I'm sure that creates interesting times and challenges for you. And we wish you the best with navigating that new process.
Appreciate that.
We have questions for Martin while he's here.
The December 15th, that's a hearing?
December 16th.
16th.
Yeah, JCSBC, it's a committee meeting. They review each agency's 5-year capital improvement plan. So ours will be presented on that
Is
day.
it public meeting?
It is a public meeting.
Okay,
And you can watch online.
okay.
Anything further for Martin? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. General discussion, fur bearer regulations, Matt Peak. Welcome again.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So yes, I'll be talking about the fur bearer regulations. The regulations referencing fur bearers are permanent regulations that are considered on an as-needed basis rather than annually. But these have been in front of the commission regularly lately. And I think the briefing book says 2022, but it was actually last year that a lot of them were in front of the commission, as well as 2022. But today I'm only going to mention the regulations for which we are considering changes, starting with KAR 115-5-4, the non-resident bobcat hunting permit. An individual who harvests a bobcat on this permit must tag it following harvest like you would a deer. And currently only a paper option is available. We recommend adding language to the regulation to allow for an electronic tagging option as well. So it would be consistent with other species like big game can currently be tagged, or turkeys. And to be clear, this is referencing the permit itself and not the pelt tag. Bobcats also have to be CITES pelt tagged. And so that requirement would remain as is, that the cat has to be presented to the department for tagging with a separate tag. But the next regulation I'll discuss is KAR 115-6-1. This is the fur dealer license regulation. The Kansas Fur Harvesters Association holds a fur auction annually following the closure of the general harvest season. Apparently, they've heard from a number of non-resident fur dealers who would like to come to the auction to buy fur, but the non-resident fur dealer cost of $400 is prohibitive to attending a single event, and there is just the one auction at this time. So they have requested the department to consider something like a reduced price auction only fur dealer permit that would allow a dealer or perhaps any individual to purchase fur bearers at one of a specified any specified auction. I mean, we wouldn't have to make it specific to just the Kansas Fur Harvester auction. It's just that is the only one that exists right now. And the intent of that change would be to improve the quality of the auction, or to potentially increase the competition for furs and the value of furs for people that are selling pelts there. And the department is considering the feasibility of this auction. I think there are a few neighboring states and a few other states that offer something similar, but we have not had a chance to get the details on those things. So that's something we're looking into. The next regulation I'd like to discuss is 115-18-9. This is the fur harvester license, unlicensed observer, and restrictions. This regulation specifies, among other things, that an unlicensed observer, well, first, it provides that an unlicensed observer can attend fur harvesting with a licensed individual, but it provides that they may not carry or use any equipment that is used in an activity requiring a fur harvester license. And there are 3 parts to this. They may not control or train any dog that is used for an activity requiring a fur harvester license. And they may not, the third one is, they may not assist in any manner that would otherwise require a fur harvester license. The department is reviewing this regulation to assess whether these restrictions are consistent with those applied to other activities in terms of what is allowed, and to assess whether there is a need to better define what is and isn't allowed. And to be a little bit more specific, an individual might be able to assist a licensed deer hunter with dragging out a deer, but an unlicensed individual may not be able to assist a licensed raccoon hunter by carrying out a raccoon. Or the other component of this is, what is equipment used in the fur harvesting activity? Some question has come up about whether or not, if an individual is accompanying a licensed houndsman, whether that person can carry a flashlight or not. Is that equipment that's used in fur harvesting? And so we think that there might be a need to clear up some of that language and just review it for consistency with what's allowed in other activities, other harvest-related activities. And the final regulation I'm going to bring up today is KAR 115-25-11. This is fur bearers' open season bag limits and permits. The department is considering whether to recommend increasing the bag limit of otters from 10 to 20. The otter population in Kansas is healthy, reproducing well, and gradually expanding its range into central Kansas, and really everywhere that there is water, they're filling in all those niches. We even had one road killed out by Meade this year. And so the area in question relative to this increase in the bag limit there, and there are units for otters, but the area in question is southeast Kansas in particular, which has the greatest number of otters, as well as the highest demand for additional harvest, particularly related to damage. They do cause some issues in ponds, especially managed ponds. When they get into them, they can be very destructive. And so there is some demand for additional damage related to harvest in particular. And then as kind of a broader comment about their status and about fur bearer management in general, muskrats and beavers have an unlimited harvest. And of course, they're all semi-aquatic species, but they, along with river otters, are always going to be scarce in the parts of the state where water is lacking. And so this isn't a situation relative to otter harvest where we're waiting for otters to get abundant statewide. We're never going to have a bunch of otters in Lane County or Logan County, something like that. And so we are responding to interest and otter populations in the southeast part of the state with this, what we're considering here. And with the units that we currently have, we would not anticipate any change or increase in the parts of the state where otters are less abundant. At this point, we will continue to maintain very limited harvest in those areas. At some point, we may get to the point to where we would propose something like an open season, like we have with muskrats and beavers, with just simply the reality that these species don't exist where there's not permanent water. And so at some point down the road, and we already talk about whether or not we're over managing them. If you cross the border into Missouri, they're unlimited. And so anyway, we want to provide the opportunity that's available, that the otter population can withstand. We also want to be sure, before we were to consider opening things up any wider, that they are fully established in the central parts of the state where they would exist at the edge of their range. So with that, those are the things that we're considering at this time, and I would turn this over to you for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Matt. We have questions of Matt.
Will this be workshopped in January? Or
Yes.
okay, yeah, I had a couple of calls on this subject. And I just encouraged them to come to the Russell meeting because they're out in my way. So I just wanted to be sure it was on you.
On river otters or?
No, on fur bearer.
Okay.
Regulations.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Matt, were you getting a lot of public solicitation to change this number on otters?
Somewhat. It's mostly discussions we've had in the fur bearer committee. And so our representatives from Southeast Kansas are reporting high levels and increasing damage from otters. And this is just a constant thing. People who, especially if you're trying to feed catfish or something like that, harvest isn't always a solution, but it is much more palatable when people have a local trapper or something that they can have address these issues when they arise. Early on, in some cases, you can have some pretty good numbers of otters. And so it helped a little bit when we increased in Southeast Kansas, when we increased the bag limit to 10, because in some cases, an individual trapper could have a few complaints, but he would go to the first pond. And most of these complaints are in ponds, to be clear, but go to the first pond and catch 5 otters, and then he's done and he can't go help the other people. They can run in group, especially this kind of young males can be in groups of up to a dozen or so at times. So not that that's particularly common, but it's not unheard of.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any questions from the audience of Matt? Welcome. Please identify yourself. And
hi, I'm Jackie Augustine. I'm from Topeka, Kansas, and I represent Audubon of Kansas. And I was just curious, do you do surveys for the otters, or do you rely on public input about what they're seeing?
We primarily rely on input on where they're taken, and then we log observations, particularly outside of common areas.
And if I remember right, this regulation, the season started not too long ago, right?
2011.
Okay, so it's been a decade.
Yeah.
And so, was it 10 otters when it started?
It started out as 2 otters with 100 or 100 otter statewide quota. And we did that for a couple years. Then we went to a 2 otter bag limit and went to unlimited. And then we increased it up to 5 eventually, and then up to 10 several years ago.
Are you still gonna have the statewide limit?
That we haven't had a statewide limit since the second year of the season. We did it for 2 years and then did away with it. And it was mandatory harvest reporting at that time. So when we hit the quota, we ended the season. The harvest has been a few hundred animals, and there's not a whole lot of people that are maxing out the bag limit right now. And so we anticipate that the increased harvest is going to be low. And I will provide some more specific details on what we might project as far as harvest at the next meeting. I will say at this time, we are discussing this. This is not a recommendation yet.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. We're in the early stages of talking about this.
And I guess, my concern might be that there be someone who, like you said, wipes out a whole population within a county or something like that. Do you have any concerns about that, or?
No, that's not possible. In the areas where if we did increase in the units that they're in, that's not possible. I mean, there's too much water in each of those counties. Originally, when we opened the season, we made an estimate of the otter population based on calculating the total linear miles of stream within various watersheds. And then we had, from a K-State student, we had an estimated occupancy rates within each of these watersheds that we applied some estimated densities to. And there's too much water in those counties. And when you get out on the ground, otters travel widely and are relatively difficult to catch in general, just because they're sporadically present. So it can work out very good if you happen to be in the place where the otter is when you set the trap, but otherwise otters are notorious amongst trappers for having to leave traps in place for sometimes a month to get them to show up. So
My cousin's a trapper, so I know a little
You
bit
got the-
about it.
yeah.
Just, thank you for the information.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Thank you very much, Matt. I think you're up again, aren't you?
Okay,
for
yes, I am.
Moving into the workshop session.
Yes. Moving on to antelope, KAR 115-25-7, and this is open season bag limit and permits. I provided a pretty extensive presentation on Pronghorn at the last commission meeting, so I'm not going to repeat an overview of the regulation at this time. I will say we don't have any proposed changes for the regulation today. And the main question right now relative to whether or not there's going to be a change at all to this regulation is what we will want to do with permit allocations. And we like to wait on those until after the winter aerial surveys are completed in January and February. So it'll be a little ways down the road until we make those decisions. And so at this time, I don't have anything more to add relative to this regulation, and I'll turn this over for questions.
Questions? Questions from the audience? Thank you very much. You're on to elk now. I
Okay,
believe,
yep.
Matt.
Yeah, so we're in the same situation with elk as we are with pronghorn, that I provided a lot of detail on this regulation and elk management at the last meeting. And so I'm not going to cover the specifics of the regulation today. We also don't have any proposed changes to the season structure or things that would be material to the regulation itself, but we are waiting on permit allocations. We do not generally conduct aerial elk surveys. Fort Riley does that in the winter. And so if they're able to complete that, we will take their findings into account relative to our permit recommendations. But maybe the main thing we often use is harvest success, particularly on based out of the Fort Riley permits, before we come back sometime later in the year with elk permit allocations. And that's all I have for elk.
Very good. Questions for Matt? The audience? Thank you very much, Matt.
All right, thank you.
Levi Jaster going to talk Deer 25 Series big game regulations. Welcome back, Levi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Deer 25 series regulations are set up our statewide seasons and also govern our antlerless permit usage across the state. And I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about some of the potential adjustments that we are looking into on antlerless deer permits, specifically our whitetail antlerless permits and their seasons. It's been a few years since we've adjusted these, and so it's some changes in population as such. We'll be working on that. So I have a presentation to show some of these. So this is our current unit and distribution. So right now the map doesn't show up very well, but so I'll have to just kind of work through this with you all. Unit 18, we have no whitetail antlerless permits that are in use there. They're allocated for that unit. And then units 17, 6, 8, 9, and 10 are all units that only have one permit allocated for antlerless whitetail hunting. And then all the rest of the units have the full 5 that a hunter could have allocated in those, including, and generally those, only the first antlerless permit can be used on statewide on any property. The additional 4 that a hunter can get are valid on private land in Weehaw and generally not on department lands, because we're trying to provide hunting opportunity for as many people as we can, except down on Elk City and Barren Stick wildlife areas where they are valid there specifically through regulation. And with those differences in the permit numbers, we have a difference in season. So unit 18 with no whitetail antlerless permits allocated for down there, there is no January antlerless season in that unit. And then in 17, 6, 8, 9, and 10, it's a short season. It varies with the calendar a little bit, but generally it's about a week long. And then most of the other units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 11, 14, and 16, all have the medium length season. So approximately 2 weeks in January for antlerless whitetail hunting. And then in units 12, 13, 15, and 19, it's a longer season. Unit 19 is kind of a special case. It only directly applies to antlerless deer, but it was put in place to increase antlerless deer harvest up in the urban centers along the I-70 highway corridor. And what we are looking at potential adjustments would be, boy, my colors really did not show up, so I apologize for that. Would be moving units 1, 2, and 3 potentially more into the 17, where it'd be 1 antlerless permit, which would also move it to the short season. And then depending on the information, we are currently wrapping up our yearly population surveys right now. And so by the January season, we'll know better what we have for this year. Although I'm going to show you some data from last year and the last few years. But there is potential that western tier of units 1, 2, and 17 might be considered for no antlerless permits allocated for it, like 18. But again, like I said, we'll see once we have our data for this year and review some comments. And then we would move 6, 8, 9, and 10 into that mid-length season, and then also up the allocation for antlerless permits from 1 to 5 in that area. And then the last couple changes would be we would move units 11 and 14 into the longer season. They already have 5 antlerless permits allocated in there per hunter, but this would give people an additional week or so to harvest antlerless deer. And I'll just run through some quick, specific to the units that would be mainly looking at changes in, just some population stuff. And like I said, this is from up to last year. We're currently doing our surveys right now. So we'll have some additional, but unit one's been declining the last few years. Some of this is, initially we kept the number of antlers permits up in that area and most of that northwest corner of the state for disease management. But we've certainly achieved our population goals, I think, there, probably largely due to drought. That's been what we've suffered from the most in that part of the state, and likely reduced our deer population pretty well, maybe better than we could have done through hunting alone. Two is the same way, been pretty low this last few years. Three has not been as low, but it's somewhat stable, although last, from 2022 to 2023, it's gone down a little bit. Based on comments from hunters, this is probably a case of parts of that area are hiding changes in the rest of the unit. And so we're getting some good numbers on like the eastern edge of that unit, but then the western edge is down. That's probably where a lot of the break for some of these changes in drought reduction.
I can tell you in the Russell area, we're significantly lower than we were a year ago.
And we'll see what happens with our population surveys. But I would suspect that we'll probably see that be lower than where it was last year even. And then unit 6, we're certainly seeing an increase in crop damage complaints in that and desire to harvest more antlerless deer. And so be looking at bumping that up. That blue line is the trend over the 5 years. That red line is the average density over the 5 years. So we're certainly trending up there. Same thing in unit 8. We'll see. And when we look at these numbers, we're working from trends over time. We're not looking from just last year's estimate versus the year before. We want to see those changes a couple of years. So it's not just one good year and back to normal, or one bad year and back to normal. Unit 9, you couldn't hardly draw on a straighter line with our estimates, all trending up. And then the same thing with 10, they've been going up. We're getting back up to good numbers in those areas. So it'd be good to give folks some more opportunity in there. And then 11, Southeast Kansas is where we've got our highest deer numbers. So it's been up. We've, flattened out from 1 year, but we'll see what this year brings. But we can give people some more opportunity to hunt antlerless deer, certainly there. Same thing with unit 14, it's been increasing too. And so, like I said, we'll come back to you in January with this year's numbers added to this to see the better picture. And I should have our crop damage complaints summarized too by the units coming into that to see the complete picture. But those are kind of the things that we're considering looking into as a possible recommendation going forward, changing these now.
Now, the earliest any change would be 25-26 season.
Yeah. So, and it depends a little bit on the promulgation process and where we can go with that. In talking with Curtis, we'll have to do some evaluation too of some of this to see whether this comes in under the economic impact limits or not too.
And then 1, 2, and 3, the ones where we're seeing the steeper declines, you're thinking right now, not recommending anything, but maybe a 5-to-1 limit.
It could be a 5-to-1 change, or depending on what our numbers come in as and potential public thoughts, it could possibly go to a none on some of those units anyways. Probably not all of those would change down to that far, but certainly at least reducing it to 1 antlerless permit per hunter in those areas is needing to be done, I think.
Yeah.
Maintain our deer numbers.
Unless we see something surprising in December in our area.
We need to string together 2 or 3, 4 years of good rain out there, I think, to really see a change. And that's what I have for the Deer 25 series.
Any further questions for Levi? Anything from the audience? Thank you, Levi. Big Game 4 series.
All right. The big game 4 series are our permanent regulations. They involve 4-2, which is our general provisions, includes information that's going to be on a carcass cat tag, procedures for transferring meat to another person, things like that. 4-4 is our legal equipment and taking methods. 4-6 outlines the boundaries of our management units. 411 it describes our general application procedures and what happens if we have to establish a priority draw for limited quota permits. 413 is our permit descriptions and restrictions. And then 415 is our restitution scoring system, which is just outlines the measurements that must be taken to determine a gross score for establishing restitution values of antlered white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, and pronghorn. As we are not going to be proposing any changes to these regulations going forward, we are going to go ahead and drop these from the agenda, I think, and not consider any more right now. So with that, I would take questions.
Questions? Questions from the audience? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jordan Hoffmeyer, 5-year review of threatened and endangered species and species in need of conservation.
Good afternoon, Commission, colleagues, attending public. We're still moving through this process. We're getting a little bit closer. I'll provide a little bit more detailed look at where we're at, but I'll keep shortening my presentation each time as we get a little bit closer. So every 5 years, we go through a review of our threatened and endangered species list and our species in need of conservation list. And just a little bit of background, the Kansas Non-Game and Endangered Species Conservation Act provides us the authority to list species as these categorizations. Maybe.
Sorry. Go ahead.
It's not doing anything. Nope, there we go, catching up. It describes the process for adding and removing species to these lists, and describes the process for developing recovery plans that allows us to permit development projects that might affect listed species or their habitats. And it allows us to enter into conservation agreements with landowners that might be doing things that benefit these listed species. So we have 3 listing levels in the state. Endangered would be the highest level of imperilment in the state, and those species receive protection from take, so harm or harassment, and also protection of critical habitat. And threatened species are a lower severity, but they receive the same protections that endangered species do. Species in need of conservation are our lowest listing categorization, and they're protected from take, but they do not receive habitat protections. So to summarize what I brought before you a few times, we've got 3 species that we received petitions for that we have deemed appropriate to move forward with. And this is largely due to better looking populations than previously understood, or wider ranges or wider habitat uses, largely due to a lot of effort from our survey crews and some partners. So we will be proposing to move the shoal chub, broad-headed skink, northern map turtle, all from threatened, down listing them to species in need of conservation. So here's a quick look at the process that we're going through. You know, we opened up our petition process in July of last year. That closed, and then it goes to a science committee of conservation and academic professionals to review those petitions for their scientific merit to determine whether those petitions move forward or not. And after that, we solicit some species experts, and they provide, you know, their their expert analysis of where those species should be listed. During this whole process, we're doing some public information meetings to gather information from the public, but also to inform them what we're doing. So we're past all of those things so far. I know we've been working with legal staff on getting an intent notice posted in the Kansas Register, and that is to gather more public comments on these changes to better inform a final decision. So once we hit that intent posting, there'll be 90 days for public comment, and we'll start moving forward with a more final proposal. So just to highlight some of the previous engagement that we've done on this, we had 5 different public meetings earlier this late winter. Been to a couple commission meetings so far, and we'll continue to come to these until we are through the process. A couple of other minor things that we will be changing. There's a date in our regulations that specifies when people have to have documentation if they possess a specimen of a listed species. This date's not been updated in a long time, and we think it would be a good thing to move that to more of a durable date, like we have with so many of our other regulations. We also take the opportunity to kind of clean up our lists because species names change over time. So every 5 years we go through and we use NatureServe as a standard for what names we use. So we'll be updating those as well. Future opportunities, once we get to the Kansas Register with that intent posting, there'll be an open public comment period. We'll also be sending direct letters to neighboring states, a bunch of different state, federal, and local and tribal organizations to solicit comments from them. And of course, there'll be future commission meetings. And so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you think of something later, there's my contact information. We also have a website that has more information about this process, as well as a document repository that contains all of the decision documents that we've come through up to this point. So I'll take any questions.
Jordan, you've been at this for quite some time. Are you seeing any significant resistance or opposition to the track you're on?
Nope.
Very good. Questions from the commission?
Jordan, who'd you say determines the final name?
Sorry. We use NatureServe. They're an organization that kind of acts as a data clearinghouse. And so what they do is like each group of animals kind of has what we call a taxonomic authority who decides what the name is. And the nice thing that NatureServe does is they go through all those different taxonomic authorities and develop a standardized list. And so rather than us having to go through and look at each of those things individually, they've got that list already developed. So that's what we use for our names.
So is that nationally acknowledged or internationally acknowledged?
Yeah. 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 A lot of different states work with them through their natural heritage inventories. So
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions from the commission or the public? Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks.
Why are you moving some of the species into species of need of conservation? Because just because you're seeing more of them or they're increasing doesn't mean that you have to kind of move them into that category. They're still kind of endangered, but that just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make it any better that the fact that they're still kind of on the endangered list and all that.
Okay. So we use science to guide this whole process, and it's not just us making these decisions. It's experts on these species that know a lot about these species. And so they're taking a look at the existing science and the data that's been presented to determine if their current listing level is warranted or if they should be moved to a lower categorization. So in doing that, if we have species on our list that are doing much better than they previously were, we don't need to spend as much effort in conserving those as we do with some of the other species that are doing much more poorly. So it's a way that we can prioritize our efforts to focus on the species that need it the most.
How does, maybe this will help, how does a threatened versus species in need of conservation change the way we manage, change the way landowners are able to enjoy their land, change any, how does it differ?
Yeah, so the biggest difference between threatened and species in need of conservation is that threatened species receive habitat protection. Species in need of conservation do not. I will note, though, that normal farming and ranching practices are exempt from regulation. So your average landowner doing, normal activities within their land isn't generally affected by our management and regulation of these species.
Right, but if do they run a higher risk of becoming threatened again if they're downgraded to species because of anything that happens in the habitat?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the potential for that. And that's why we're out doing studies and doing the surveys to keep track of those populations. One of the things about going from threatened to species in need of conservation, that kind of keeps them on our radar so that we're not, totally dumping them off the list and losing track of them. So it gives us the ability to react a little bit better if they do become more imperiled in the future. But we have, if we find that they're continuing to do well, then they may get downlisted from species in need of conservation to totally unlisted.
Thank you. Oh, please.
The ornate box turtles years ago, probably 2006, 7, right in there. I would be driving up the tollway 35, and the ornate box turtles littered the highway. And frequently I would stop and pick them up and throw them in back of my truck to save them. I brought them home, put them in my yard. I have a native yard, both front and back, and I'm up against a wetlands, and they thrived. I had about 4 or 5 that I had picked up over a period of time, and they thrived and they began to mate. And I had box turtles in my yard for a long period. 2 years ago, I no longer saw any box turtles. They left. But for a long time, I was able to enjoy box turtles. The ranches that exist, the box turtles were able to come off those ranches and then get into the highway. Well, I thought, well, what could we do? What can we do to stop this? And I was in New Jersey, and they have terrapins. And what they did in New Jersey, because all these turtles or terrapins were all dead along the highway, they put tubing along the highway. So when the turtles came up to that tubing, they couldn't get over. And I thought, wow, we could do that here in Kansas. We could require of these ranches to put something there. They're wealthy ranches. It wouldn't be that expensive for them. And so taking something off the endangered, I don't really know how you go about it. This is all new to me. But I was impressed because they did something about it. They did something about it because the kids were upset seeing the dead terrapins all the time. So just sort of a comment. There are things we can do, and there are things that maybe the ranchers can do and the farmers can do that are simple, that don't cost a lot of money. I do not see ornate box turtles on the highway anymore. I don't think there's enough of them.
Yeah, there are certainly some improved best management practices that could be done. I would say that requiring the ranchers to put something like that up, who are providing quality habitat might not be the best route to go. That would maybe be better suited for whatever transportation authority is doing that. But there are certainly things that could be done better. And some of that needs to be looked at a little bit.
Good discussion. Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate the comments and the questions. We're now at section F, informational items and updates. So do we have anything under that category? Back again to general public comments. Any more public comments from anyone in the audience or online?
Nobody online, no, sir.
What's that? Not online? Old business? Yes, Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you, Whitney. And the Secretary may cover this in his remarks, or one of you guys. Are you guys going to talk about the senior licenses?
I did.
Oh, you already did. I'm sorry, I'm late.
You're all right.
Committee. I've been to Topeka and back this morning and
Crazy.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Carpenter. We spoke about it earlier in the context of given the lapse in those licenses that we discussed, we've decided to add, the Secretary, I should say, decided to add a few other options, 5-year senior hunt, 5-year senior fish, and a 5-year combo, which we have the current legal authority to propose under our regulations. So that's the context that came up. And do you have any further questions?
I do. My the House attorney, my revisor at the House, firmly and clearly believes that the department already has the authority. And we've talked about that, and I sent you a lot of this information. So I've been working on this. I'll have a bill introduced the first week of session to correct this, but I also was curious about who actually enforced that law. It's kind of a victimless crime law as far as I'm concerned. And so I talked to Attorney General Kobach on the way down here. And I said, well, what can I tell you? What can I tell folks to speak for you? And he said, as far as he was concerned, he thought that the Secretary had that authority. They were continuing to review that. So I just think that we have that authority already.
Yeah.
And I realize, but he's the enforcer. So if the enforcer isn't going to do anything to us for selling these senior licenses, I'm just not understanding why we wouldn't go ahead and do that.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, the question of, of course, I used to work at the Attorney General's office for the last 6 years before this job. That question comes up often on whether who's going to enforce it. That's a separate question of whether we have, or the Secretary has the legal authority in the first place. The Secretary has an independent constitutional duty to abide by the laws. So even if there isn't a threat of enforcement from somebody, we're still under the obligation to follow the law as it's stated. And I will, and as I made clear when we discussed this previously, I firmly disagree that we have the authority to offer that exact license. And particularly because if you look at the regulation that was adopted after KSA 32-9100 was adopted, we amended our regulation. And at the bottom of the regulation, it always says authorized by and implementing, and it states the specific statutes that are that we're implementing. If you look back in 2012 or 13 when we adopted that regulation, it cited specifically 32-9100, saying that was our legal authority for offering that specific license at $40. Now, the legislature, by its own terms, stated in the statute that it expired on June 30th, 2020. Therefore, once that date passed, the authority that was vested in the Secretary expired, and any regulation that was adopted pursuant to that statute, and I called the Secretary of State's office to confirm this, and they agree with me that once that statute no longer is effective, it by operation of law revokes the regulation that implements it. That's the explanation I've given. I remain firm that that's the correct legal interpretation. I understand that the Attorney General may not seek to stop us from using the broader perceived power or the power in our fee statute, but at least on this specific fee, I don't think we have the authority to offer that $40, and I'm quite firm in that.
We're just going to have to respectfully disagree, aren't we?
That is perfectly fine. I've had many of respectful disagreements. Do you have any other questions on the
Thank you, Mr.
licenses?
Chairman. That's all I had to add.
No, thank you, Curtis.
Thank you very much.
No more old business? Public comments? Deputy Secretary Schrag, we're here at other business, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Good afternoon. Stuart Schrag, Deputy Secretary of Operations out of Pratt. First off, I'd like to recognize our first special guest who thought he could sneak in undetected today. I'd like to recognize former Wildlife and Parks Commissioner Harrison Williams. Good to see you, old friend. All right, Sheila Kimmis, would you please come up here for a minute?
That's the whole balance of this corner.
Front and center, please, ma'am. Many of you know that today is Sheila's last commission meeting. Sad day for all of us. So I'd just like to take a few minutes to recognize her. And I thought I'd start off with a little biography of her time here with Kansas Wildlife and Parks. Just some notable notes on Sheila Kimmis. So Sheila started, and you're really good at correcting me on a daily basis, and I appreciate that. So if I've messed anything up here, please step in. She started with the agency in 1989 on a part-time basis, working both in the Fish and Wildlife branch of the agency as well as education. They were both kind of part-time jobs at the time that kind of morphed into a pretty much a full-time job. So that's 35 years with the agency. She's been the commission secretary since 2001 for a total of 23 years. Been the executive secretary for the deputy secretary of operations for 22 years. Has also been in charge of the employee newsletter for the past 21 years. That used to be in the information and education section of the agency. And when the lead person who was in charge of that newsletter retired, there was talk of just doing away with that employee newsletter. And Sheila stood up and said, and showed how important that employee newsletter is to the agency. It keeps us all connected. Lets everybody know what's going on as agency employees, but also gives a flair for the family feel and what's going on in our employees' personal lives. So she stood up and said, okay, nobody else is going to do it, I'll do it. So she's been doing that for the last 21 years. And to go along with that too, and that family connection, she's been in charge of keeping communication with retired employees, whether that be for events that we have or just communication on retirees that have passed away, and just keeping those close connections, and also utilizing past retirees for information that might have been lost somewhere along the way. So that's been a good resource too. How long have you been doing that, keeping in touch with retirees?
23 years.
About 23 years. She's also been organizing the annual Halloween event that we have there at the Pratt operations office. It may not seem like much, but it's a well-received event for the Pratt community. It's been a longstanding tradition, and Sheila's been integral in organizing it and helping carry out that event that really does connect to the local community there. She started, and she's been doing that for 21 years. So a lot. She started compiling all the agency historical information over 10 years ago. And a lot of that has to do with nothing really on the financial side of the agency, but just the historical records that tells our story, even clear back until 1878, right? When all we had was a fish warden. We didn't become an official state agency until 1905. So it's those historical records that she's been maintaining that really gives us a history and shows how we've matured over all these decades. So we're going to continue to do that because it really does help tell our story. And Secretary Kennedy mentioned this week that it'd be nice to compile all that. She's already compiled a lot of it, but to put it in a format that's maybe an edition or some kind of thing that we could distribute. It's pretty neat story to tell. She's been the recording secretary and keeper of the archives for the Midwest Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies for the past 25 years. 30 years ago, she helped form the Becoming an Outdoors Woman program, or BOW program, BOW. And this past September, she was honored by having the BOW scholarship renamed as the Sheila Kimmis Scholarship for Aspiring Outdoors Women. Her efforts with BOW have placed it on solid ground long into the future. And while KDWP is full of passionate and dedicated employees, some rise to the top as being part of the solid foundation that makes this agency great. This woman is for sure one of those employees. I joke that, for building construction, when you build a foundation made out of concrete, you put rebar in to support the foundation and maintain its integrity for decades. Sheila's our rebar. Her stamp will always be evident. Her dedication and passion for the agency and natural resources over the years is an irreplaceable asset that will greatly be missed. She always kept the commission meetings in check and frankly kept all of us in order and in line. One of my favorite quotes from Teddy Roosevelt is this: "The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which must in turn," let me back up, I'll start over. "The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which it must turn over to the next generation increased and not impaired in value." Sheila has accomplished something very similar over the past 35 years. She is now turning her work over to the next generation of Wildlife and Parks employees, which has increased and not impaired the value of this agency. She has impacted every avenue of natural resource management and the department, our constituents, and we are all grateful for her dedication. This past June, many of you know we hosted the National Bison Association Summer Conference at Maxwell Wildlife Refuge. And Sheila put this little framed poster together of all of our emblems over the decades that has the bison on it. And so today I'm giving this to her. I think it really reflects her career over time. She's been here through the changes, whether it be a logo or administration or operations or whatever. And so Sheila, thank you for your service and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you, everybody. I don't know if I can say much after that. I've been thinking about what I'd say at my retirement party. And I thought to myself, well, I always told people I wanted to go out with a bang, but the state really frowns on you bringing explosives. So I thought maybe I'll just ease out a little bit, but not completely, just go out quietly. So sorry about that. I've loved my job, the family atmosphere we have. I don't know. I just have loved what I've done for the last 35 years. And I'm one of those behind the scenes people. I don't like to be up front and center, but, I do what I can behind the scenes to make sure things happen. So I'm one of those people. And so I'm not really great about being in front of people, but I appreciate all of you and I have enjoyed meeting everyone over the years and working with a lot of you in different respects and all the different projects I've done. So I'm a keeper. I told them at the Bow when I received that Bow award, I said, I'm one of those people who grabs on and holds on to things that I do. I'm still a paper person. I like to have a piece of paper in my hand. So I have paper and I've had to purge. Believe me, I have purged a lot of paper in the last couple months trying to get ready for the retirement. But like I said, I brought the history up to where it's current, I believe, and it's on the intranet. If you can get into the internet, you can see it. Reports are there, everything's there. History's been really important to me. And the reason I started that, I self-appointed, believe me, one of those things I couldn't let go. But I just kept seeing with the retirees and things, all that knowledge and all those reports and things that they did in their long careers went out the door with them. And then when you start looking for something, it's not there. It's not there. So, I've compiled a whole lot of reports out there. Back to 1980 is pretty firm. Anything before that is sketchy, but all the annuals are there and all those things are there. And I'm hoping that eventually we'll make them useful, so that the public can see them and maybe use them as reference documents because there's a lot of it out there. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate having worked with all of you and I'm going to enjoy my retirement. So it's time. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sheila. I know those on the commission like me who have been here a very short time appreciate all of the work you did to get us onboarded and fill out the right documents and everything on track. And it took a number of emails and calls and conversations from you to get us straight. And I know those who've been on here for a number of years have really grown to appreciate all you've done for us.
Thank you.
If other commissioners have comments, feel free.
Thanks.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you personally, Sheila. You have been awesome to work around the short time that I've been here. A lot of the history that I've learned about this agency has come from Sheila. In fact, I shared a presentation with the commissioners, I think a couple commission meetings ago, about the history of the agency. We can thank Sheila for that information. She took me all the way back to the late 1800s, and I'm a history nut myself. And so I really appreciated that. And I think you're right, Sheila. I think that history warrants to be put in a format that can be shared with, the public, commissioners and other interested parties. And so look forward to hopefully something coming out here pretty soon. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is future meeting locations and dates. I know we're going to Russell in January. We're going to Topeka in March. We want to look out further than that.
Well, actually, if I might interject here real quickly, I think what we might want to do is the January meeting, given the legislative session kicking off, I'd like to have that closer to Topeka. I'd like to maybe swap out Russell for maybe in April. Does the commission have an opinion on that? I just want to give, my understanding is historically in years past, the January meeting was near Topeka. And then the subsequent one was in Topeka itself. I want to be able to open it up so that legislators have easier access to our commission meetings. What does the commission have any thoughts on that?
Be fine with me. Other comments? We promise we'll come to Russell.
The only
We'll
problem
get
is I
there.
booked and paid for the facility and it's already been listed in anything that Madeline has put out.
Yes, we can work on updating it, but, and looking into those problems, but I promise we will go to Russell.
Okay,
Is that okay?
I think that's fine with the commission.
Thank you.
So you'll work on a location for January?
Yes, we'll work on a location for January. And we'll get out a notice as soon as possible. Thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I was, you jumped into the fine tribute to Ms. Sheila, but I wanted to ask that you please place on the agenda for the next meeting, wherever it is, on January 30th, a hearing and an opportunity for public comment on the proposal that I had mentioned before to expand night vision and light-assisted hunting of coyotes all 12 months of the year, with the exception of those days in which rifle deer hunting is permitted. I'm also requesting that you place on the same agenda immediately thereafter a discussion and a vote by the commission on that matter.
I appreciate that. I was aware of that. I'd like to defer to the secretary or legal counsel to talk about timing and schedule and comments on that request.
Yeah, I think we can add that to the January agenda. I don't know if we'll be prepared to make a vote on it that day, but we can definitely have staff provide information on what the department's stance is on night vision and coyote hunting.
Clarification from legal counsel, if I might, or the secretary. Would a change in that regard require a new rule and regulation? Or is that something the commission can do on its own
No,
motion, so to speak?
sorry. No, I think the way the statute's written now, the proposal has to come from the secretary on a new rule and regulation. We can certainly put it on the discussion to talk about it. But as far as enacting a new regulation, the secretary proposes and the commission has clearly defined powers in approving, denying, or modifying.
So to make the change that Commissioner Mark requests, would it require a rule and reg, or could it be done administratively, I guess is my question.
It would require a rule and reg.
May I ask Mr. Acting Secretary, is it your position that the commission does not have the authority to vote on wildlife regulations on our own initiative?
My interpretation really doesn't matter. It's what statute states, what our roles are. And I think it would be a good discussion to open up and have and see if we can come to an agreement on something that we could propose in the future. But I think before we got to the point where we were ready to propose anything, I think it would be wise to call some of our law enforcement, our game wardens in to discuss some of the implications that allowing coyote hunting year round or night vision year round, some of the implications that could occur as a result. So I want you and the commission to be privy to that information, and we're happy to embark on the conversation.
That, if I may, a couple follow-ups. That's why I asked that this be on the agenda for January 20th, which would give anyone in the agency or outside the agency the opportunity to gather whatever information they thought would be pertinent to that type of a discussion, and then have the commission vote on that immediately after allowing agency and public comment. Because I guess my question is, if the commission does not have the authority to unilaterally or to promulgate legislation or regulation like this, then the agency itself, you could just stop any wildlife regulatory reform by you just refusing to have your staff propose it.
We're certainly not, we're certainly open to the discussion. It's the agency's job to propose. It's the commission's job to adopt, modify, or deny.
So then my point is well taken. Then, in your opinion, the commission can only vote on what's brought to us by the agency, but we do not have any unilateral power to promote regulations. We can only vote on what you and your agency brings to us to vote on. Is that your position, sir?
It's not a position. That's the way it's written in statute. My opinion really doesn't matter. It's the way the statute is written.
I would ask that to still be placed on the agenda. I'll bring additional information with me next meeting.
Yes, and we can place the discussion on the agenda, Commissioner. I think, our understanding, our reading of the statute is the defined roles of the commission and the secretary is that the secretary proposes the regulation, and then the commission, in addition to its powers of advising the secretary on certain matters, then has the steps of approving, denying, or modifying. Now, if the modification were beyond what the public noticed, because we have to notice this up before so that the public's aware of what's being voted on, that modification may exceed the notice that was put there. So, but yes, that is our interpretation of the statutes as they stand.
Oh, then you just raised another question for me. If we do put it on the agenda and there's no modifications to what we're asking to be placed on the agenda, then is it your legal opinion we can go forth and vote on that at the time?
No, because in that case, the commission would still be the one proposing the regulation. It would have to be the secretary that proposes the regulation.
Like Mr. Carpenter, I'm going to just agree to disagree.
Well, in any event, it sounds like we're going to discuss the matter in January. So we'll see where we go with that. Further comments, Commissioner Mark?
No, thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Public comment. Okay.
Commissioner, I'm Kurt Ratzlaff, and just listening to this last conversation, it struck me that what Commissioner Mark, what Keith was proposing was to eliminate the public comment sections, what it sounded like to me. And I just want to make sure that the public has the opportunity to continue to comment before regulations go into effect. And I don't think I heard that in the timeline that he was offering, and maybe I missed it, but I just want to make sure that the public continues to have the ability to comment before any changes or any affirmations for that fact are made.
Yeah, you did mishear.
There is a process we have to follow, and we will do that.
And Kurt, you did mishear. I did say that we would have immediately after discussion, public comment, and then a vote.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I misunderstood, but there still has to be a public notice where we publish in the register the proposed rule and regulation ahead of time. I think for series 25, it's 30 days. And then the others, we have to have a 60-day notice to give the public time to review the regulation. So that's my understanding.
As a practice, we've workshopped these things twice. So that means we discuss them at 2 meetings before they come to a vote. So the vote wouldn't happen until the 3rd time at the earliest. Now, is that a matter of practice, which I prefer because I want to give the public plenty of time to comment on any issues, or is that required?
Well, so I think my understanding of the workshop sessions, it's 3 is the number that has been historically. We workshop items before the commission. It's kind of varied in the past on either voting it to go forward, but in reality, the statute just says that the secretary proposes. So it's really more of a courtesy step after 3 workshop sessions. We want to make sure the commission doesn't have any further questions before we go into promulgation. The statutory authority is actually the vote to approve, deny, or modify. So actually going forward, after I've given it more thought on the front end there with the workshop sessions, when we get to the end, the program person who is speaking on behalf of the secretary will basically ask, are there any further questions from the commission before we move into promulgation? I hope is that clear as mud?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I just want to be on record that I really prefer we give the public plenty of opportunity to comment on any of these issues, particularly the ones that are controversial.
And I think as a follow-on, we've had some people in public comments who have requested that we provide perhaps more detail in the public notice for this. And so it would, we put this on the agenda, it would clearly state what the issue is to be discussed, and people can come in and give us their opinions and comments, as opposed to amending a fur harvester reg. I mean, I know that it's the legal requirement, but let's go a step further and make sure people understand this is what's going to be talked about.
Would it be possible, Mr. Chairman? Would it be possible, Mr. Chairman, to go ahead and have the proposed legislation drafted as worded, and then we have something concrete to start discussing and moving down the trail? Just very, very succinctly to allow, 12 months of the year, with the exception of deer rifle season, hunting of coyotes at night with night vision and light, etc. I'll be happy to
I defer to the
provide.
Secretary of Legal Counsel, but if they want to agenda that particular topic in that manner, then I wouldn't object to it.
We won't be ready to make a proposal in January.
Right.
We'll be ready to discuss it. I think we need to hear from our staff. We need to hear from the biologists on the ground. We need to hear from the public. This is the core information that we utilize to develop our regulations. And I, would be hesitant to alter that process. I'm not saying that I'm personally not open to what you're proposing, but at this point, we at least have set processes to establish what regulations are, and I don't see any reason to change that process at this point in time. And in fact, if we were to do so, it could put the integrity of the agency in danger.
Commissioner Carpenter, you had comments related or unrelated?
Yeah, sir. To this, I agree. I understand, Commissioner Mark, that sometimes we get impatient, but a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the foot by not notifying the public properly and enough of it. And even then, you're still going to have folks that were not aware of the situation. And so you cause yourself a lot of grief by not. These things take time. These are, fundamental changes in the way we've done things for years and years and years. And so they take time. I understand impatience and wanting to get it done, but at the same time, we need to get it right. And not everybody agrees with your position or my position or anybody's position. And that's how we find that out in workshops and that kind of stuff. So I just slow down. Let's get it on the agenda. Let's workshop it and see where we're at on this kind of stuff, because a lot of times what we may think is a pretty cool deal, the public doesn't think that at all. So I just want to say that. And then I do want to talk about another subject, but
yes, sir.
All this, I'll be in.
Anything further on this matter? Very good. Proceed, Commissioner.
So for folks like, I'm kind of challenged sometimes with words, and I don't use words I can't spell, but I'm not even sure I can pronounce it right. Proclamation. So in that process, is there a time frame that we use for tell me how you pronounce that.
Promulgation.
Okay, good. That's an attorney speak, so I won't ever use that language probably. What would be a good substitute word for that I could spell?
Making regulations. I don't know.
Okay, well, maybe I'll use that. But we didn't have, I guess there was no discussion on the waterfowl, the non-resident waterfowl permit. Is that here?
Right. And as I think we discussed in the last meeting, what we're running up to with the waterfowl regulation is that new HB 2648, which restricts our ability to promulgate a reg that has an a compliance cost of at least $1 million over the first 5 years of its effectiveness. In that case, where we're restricting out-of-state hunters, and to that degree, in my mind, there's no way that doesn't have at least a $200,000 per year impact on compliance costs, and therefore, by the law that was passed effective July 1st of last year, what's required is what's called ratification. That's what how the legislature described it. But effectively, what it means is we have to run a bill asking for the same thing, which defeats the purpose of a regulation because we could then just ask for it in statute. So that's a long way of saying that we're stuck right now, not moving forward with that regulation.
It seems to me like that may be tweaked. You know, these documents are living documents that probably no one thought about when they were trying to get to the bottom of these regulations. Probably didn't think about how that was going to affect the Wildlife and Parks Department. So I'll see what I can do about that. So what is the time frame for a normal proclamation once it gets to that point?
Yeah, it really varies. It depends on, see, I've got a spreadsheet here of all the regulations we have in promulgation. I mean, they can go from 6 months to 8 months. A lot of it, once it goes out of our shop, out of the legal shop, it goes first to D of A, and they have to approve it, then the AG, and then after the AG, the budget. And the budget now Division of Budget takes a much larger role than they used to with this expanded economic impact statement. So I think I've talked to my staff, we're estimating that alone can last up to 4 or 5 months when it's outside of our shop. So we can get it in the process, but there are a lot of factors outside of our control on when we get it back.
So how long has that been a subject? The waterfowl permit, how long has that been?
Well, being here 2 months, I will defer to Deputy Secretary.
Yeah, Deputy Secretary Stuart Schrog, it's been a while since we first brought it forth to the commission, workshopped it numerous times. I mean, we started the conversation back in 2021, but I believe we actually tried setting it forth into the promulgation process April 4th of 24, back and forth with the entities that Kurt just mentioned, with some edits to the language, various things. So that, yeah, that's when it officially got started into the promulgation. And then we got to the point where we are now, where it would have to go to ratification.
So what was the date for official proclamation?
April 24th of
That's when we submitted it to the Department of Administration for their initial review. And then when they finally approved it on June 18th of 24, so a couple months. But then, of course, a couple weeks later, that's when that new law took effect.
So everything's done except for going through addressing the economic impact.
Not everything. There was still the legal review that's required. The next step after D of A is legal review by the Attorney General's office. So we were in the midst of legal review with the AG's office when the law took effect.
Okay. So if it's first discussed in 2021, are we not 3 years later? That seems
Correct.
like a long time to address an issue that our folks are running up against.
Mr. Commissioner, it's something that also concerns me greatly. And talking to previous attorneys with the agency, historically, it would take 6 to 8 months to get a regulation through the process. But with the added information on the economic side that we have to provide, we're looking at up to 2 years. That, as you can see, we're presenting data, we're monitoring our wildlife populations on an annual basis. Sometimes, I mean, in order for us to be effective, this is how we control wildlife, manage wildlife across the landscape. We've got to get it down. I would hope that we could get it back down to 6 to 8 months, which is much more reasonable than a 2-year time span.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Just,
Yes, sir.
go ahead.
No, go ahead, sir.
But on that subject, I think it would be helpful to get a schematic of how the process works so that we know step to step. And then as we, and I like the idea of having the status of where things are in promulgation, if you could add to that information you provide us where it is in the process and whose responsibility it is at that point, who we're waiting on basically.
Sure. And that's so two points there. The first one is on the schematic on the process. Actually, in the commissioner orientation in WICO, I provided a sheet there that talks about each one of these steps in detail.
There.
Yeah. So I'm happy to have
If I got it, I'll go get it.
we'll send it back out again so that it has a pretty detailed with statutory citations for each one of these steps. And then we actually did, it's funny you mentioned that because in the prior agenda, we did have specific each regulation where they were in promulgation, and then we stated specifically at what stage they were. However, we were finding that it was really difficult for my staff when we're updating, because that data or that information changes daily depending on who it's coming back from, who's it's going to. It was just so difficult for us to provide you accurate information on paper. So that's why I've moved it in the agenda to the front on regulations and promulgation. And my intent in putting it there when I stand up is if at that point there's a particular regulation you want to know where it's at, is it in our shop, is it with the AG, D of A? Please ask me then, and I can tell you right then exactly where it's at. But as far as writing it down, that information gets jumbled so easily.
As long as we have it available.
It's always available.
Commissioner Carson.
So how hard would it be to the week before the commission meeting, you to look? I mean, it may not be to that very day, but it would be within a week that we would get where that's at in that situation. Would that be difficult?
Well, it was because that is what we were doing, but even in the weeks leading up, like I said, that each one of those regulations, 3 or 4 of them could change, information could change. So what you're looking at the meeting is inaccurate as to where it is.
Well, what if we didn't hold your feet to the fire for accuracy, but we actually were able to see a snapshot of a time?
Yeah, that's fine. If there's a strong feeling from the commission that you would like at least a general idea of where it's at, perhaps we can find a middle ground somewhere where I can provide more general information where it's at in the process.
Even if you could bring a handout to the meeting that would be a day old, that would be helpful.
I would prefer that. I'm going to bow to the will of the other commissioners, but.
Okay. Yes, I'm happy to do that. If that's what the commission would like.
The thing about it is we field a lot of phone calls and emails and stuff like that. And I'm getting kind of tired of saying, telling folks that it's in a word that I can't even pronounce. So I just would like more information so we can talk to people and tell them I've had, I don't know how many calls for the waterfowl permits here in the last week. I'm sure you guys have too. So anyway, it just helps us get information out there and work for what's best for the folks in Kansas.
Commissioner Cross.
Yeah, Curtis, Warren took the words right out of my mouth. I'm gonna have to go back to that meeting and look. I was looking for a promulgation process flow chart as well. And what would help me is if I can have a generic one for the public or somewhere on the website that I can say, hey, here's how the process works. I can either hand it to them or they can have it on the website where it says, here's how this is laid out and, all the options. And, I understand your point. It's very complex, but that would be very helpful to me just to let people know about how long it's going to take and the process that it's going to go through.
Certainly, I think that's a good idea. I could create a simplified version of that flow chart, and we work with our our chief of public affairs and get one up on our website. We'll send a link out so that you can provide it to members of the public. I do think that's a very good idea.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify and make clear that while I agree with the Secretary and others that this promulgation process has really belabored and slowed down our regulatory actions, which, as we all know, as a state agency trying to manage valuable resources, sometimes a 2-year time span is not in the best interest of that resource. But for the waterfowl regulation specifically, I just want to make sure that everybody understands we did not submit it to the promulgation process in 21. 21 is when we brought it to the commission to start the discussion. And it was a long process, very detailed and legally backgrounded topic that we had to engage with our stakeholders, with our federal partners. So there was a lot to vet out, even with other state agencies and what they were doing. So I just wanted to make sure there was no confusion as to when that specific non-resident waterfowl restriction regulation went to promulgation. That was in fact submitted in April of 24.
Yeah, I was more just talking about the discussion started back in 2021, which is 3 years. So I get that. I did send some information around to some of you guys about what Arkansas does and has done. So maybe someone could disseminate that out to the rest of the commissioners about what they've done they've had much the same problems that we're dealing with non-residents flooding their public lands. So
yeah, and Commissioner Carpenter, that's right. That was part of that process that we started in 21, was reaching out to states like Arkansas and the Dakotas where they already implement non-resident restrictions for waterfowl hunting, and got input from all of them, tried to evaluate each one of those and decide what would be best suited for Kansas. And we have kind of a historical timeline developed and more information that we can also share with commission as to what all steps were taken to vet that. So good information to share. But you're right, we continue to get questions almost weekly. I mean, we're in the heart of waterfowl season right now, and we have a lot of very passionate residents that are contacting us on a routine basis, asking when is this going to happen. So thank you.
Well, just following up, perhaps wrapping up, the change to the rule and reg process by the legislature has really created kind of some uncharted territory for promulgation of these kinds of things, or any kind of a reg. Legal counsel talked about if you hit a certain financial threshold, $1 million over 5 years of a detrimental cost for implementing a reg, that has to come to the legislature. Well, we can look at how many licenses the department might sell or might not sell if they make a change in law. But you go down the rabbit hole where some people want to go, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong because it is a financial impact, but how many hotel rooms are we going to lose because of that? How much in sales of ammunition and guides and boat rentals and et cetera, et cetera. And that is a potential lost cause. That is a potential cost by promulgating a reg. We saw that with the fire extinguishers. And so I think it's created a little bit of uncharted territory for a lot of agencies that they're trying to really look closely at this, the Department of Administration, before they sign off on a reg, and that slows everything down. So hopefully we'll see some relief in the legislative process, maybe in the next year or two, as they see how this is working or not working and been interpreted, and we can get some more clarity. Any further comments on anything today from anyone up here? Yes, sir, in the back.
Thank you for giving me a few minutes.
Yes, sir.
My name is Harold Engel. I'm a farmer rancher, live at Madison's about 20 miles south of Emporia.
You're a 3 o'clock speaker, but I'm glad you're here early.
Well, I have a cardiologist appointment at 2:45, so I've got to make it quick.
Okay, well, thank you for coming.
What I want to address is the deer problem in our area. Let me give you a quick example. We operate about 800 acres of farmland and then do some custom work. We're on the Verdigris River, so good cover, good habitat. And one of the fields that we plant for Earl Murphy is 40 acres. We planted that and he called and said, hey, I don't have a stand. Well, you realize the custom farmer, boy, you duck your head and think, did I do something wrong? Well, we went up and looked, boy, he doesn't have a stand. So we replant him. And he calls back in a couple of weeks and said, hey, we still don't have a stand. So I called Doug Shoup, who's a good friend, and he was the Southeast Kansas area crops extension specialist, what I consider an expert. Now as retired as a farmer, but he comes up and looks around, he says, that's deer. And he shows us how he identified that. I have a picture on my phone. I mean, it's almost as bare as this is. That eventually is harvested, but just some cowboy math, that's $70 an acre to replant that to begin with. Takes another $30 an acre in spray because it had to be sprayed again. So we're up to $100. Then we planted other fields, similar ground, same time, and those yielded in the low 50s. That field yielded 30. So we're looking at 20 bushel difference. If you take 20 times roughly $10, that's $2,000 or $200 an acre, $8,000. So we're looking at over $10,000 in deer damage in just that 140 acre tract. And I operate 800 acres. So figure out what that's potentially is costing me. We called the biologist down in Emporia and he looked around and absolutely concurred with what was going on. And he said, I'll issue you deprivation permits. He gave Earl 10 permits. I think they've used 7 or 8 of those. My comment is the deprivation permits are fine, but they don't accomplish much. You're in the summer. You can't do anything with those deer. I mean, you can't take them to a locker. Most people can't process them. I hate to see them just thrown away. Not a lot of people around can process them if you gave them to them. So you're not accomplishing much. We also lease a half section to some Arkansas guys for deer hunting. I also have a half section that I do not lease that I encourage hunters to come in and kill does. And the biologist says, that's what you're going to have to do. You've got to thin out the doe. The bucks don't affect much as far as population. So particularly one out-of-state hunter's hunted there, I think 15 years. He didn't get a permit this year, so he can't come and hunt. He would gladly come and kill 2 or 3 does if he could just apply for an out-of-state doe permit. But he can't get that unless he gets a buck permit. And the buck permits come with a doe permit. I haven't seen your figures, but I'll wager not half of those guys that get bucks go ahead and get the doe. So you're not accomplishing what needs to be done there, in my opinion. So again, I'd like to see some effort, encouragement, whatever, to increase the doe harvest so that the population is stabilized. We had a machine delivered from Beloit and said something to a truck driver about deer hunting here. And he said, we don't have any deer hunting left anymore. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. I said, they got the tick, they got disease, and we don't have them. Well, I don't want to see that happen. I don't mind a few deer. I remember still the first fawn I saw in 1958, about a mile from my house, we were cutting wheat. I enjoy seeing a few, but it's reached the point that some effort needs to be to control the population. Again, I appreciate your time and I'm sorry I held you up.
No, you didn't hold us up. Points well taken.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Engel from the commission or staff?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah, we'll have Levi Jaster come back up and talk about some of that.
Yeah, Levi Jaster, Big Game Program Coordinator. I work out of the Emporia Research and Survey Office. So that area he described is one of the areas I talked about earlier today that we're adding more days to the season in January for antlerless harvest. I agree that those control permits are more of a Band-Aid. And they are issued to take care of a problem. So there is no requirement to take care of, use the deer in those cases on a crop damage control permit. And so, we issue those at that time of the year because it's to address damage that's occurring right now. But it is better to harvest a lot more does, and we're looking at expanding that. The other option too that probably should get discussed would be potentially entering some of those properties into the walk-in program. You get some compensation, but it also would get a lot more hunters out there too than just one or two that might be coming in. Additionally, for a non-resident, they do have to have a buck permit to hunt while buck season it allows the take of either sex is open. But starting on December 30th, they can buy antlerless permits over the counter, and they can buy up to the full 5 then, and they don't have to have a buck permit first in that case. So they're welcome to come in January specifically for antlerless hunting in that case.
Thank you. Questions of Levi?
No.
Thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome.
Anything left for the good of the order? All right, I guess our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your attendance, and travel safe.